welcome one more time to this episode of Duologues. I'm Dr. Sujaya Banerjee, and I'm the founder CEO of Capstone People Consulting and also of YourCommune, which is one of the largest communities of practice that we created many years ago called the Learning and OD Roundtable, which will soon be launched in a new tech avatar called YourCommune. So watch the space for YourCommune. Meanwhile, enjoy the conversation today. We've created this platform called Duologues, which is really two professionals having a chat together. So this is not an interview; it's a chat, and which means you get to be fly on the wall and listen into the conversation. But you play a more active role, which is by being able to also ask questions and state your comments as we go along. So, everyone, welcome one more time to this episode of Duologues, which is around managing talent in the new economy. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, a founder, a leader, or someone who's building a team, this conversation, is important for you. And you know that very significantly the ground has shifted on this one. We can't rely on the old playbook anymore when it comes to talent, which is counting on 9 to 5 jobs, linear careers, and loyalty that is built solely on a paycheck. This is now all outdated and it's been rewritten, and we know it. We're now operating in a very different economy. It's hyper connected, it's fueled by AI and by hybrid work. And it's also driven by a workforce that values purpose, values autonomy, values growth as much as it does a salary. And I'm sure you're interested in being able to explore whether talent practices that you are upholding within organizations is keeping pace with this inevitable change that we're seeing unfold around us. And so joining me on the conversation here today is Gyan Nagpal. I'm sure many of you know about him already. He is the author of a book called Talent Economics. In fact, we ran a couple of courses on talent economics in India with Gyan, who's located in Bangkok in Singapore at this time. And he's also the author of a book called The Future Ready Organization that he just wrote literally on the eve of the pandemic. Gyan's currently the Director of Human Resources with the AIA Group, and he's also the Dean of the AIA Leadership Center. He's their CLO. And Gyan, it's always a pleasure to be able to have you with us and to have a conversation with you. I consider this a privilege. And so with that, I'm going to start at the start by welcoming you and, of course, asking you to come in to the first part of what this conversation is going to be around, which is what has very significantly disrupted. And I'll start with at the start, which is what are we even looking for in the context of talent? And I think this has been a question that clients ask me all the time, which is, especially with the new generations coming in and with all the changes that are surrounding us. I just said that it is a new playbook. The old playbook won't work anymore. What should we, in this playbook, be looking for in the context of talent? And the reason, we're starting at the start with this is because it is an area of turmoil and pain across industries, across organizations, who are finding it difficult to attract the right kind of talent, finding it difficult to be able to retain this talent. And we're literally at this stage talking about entry-level talent that we actually bring into the organizations. They used to be structured MBA programs and structured graduate engineer training programs and so on. It appears that none of this is really quite working in the way in which it used to, sort of yield your talent pipelines and so on. And a large part of this is coming out of a kind of disconnect, obviously, between what they're studying in colleges and what you're expecting in terms of workplace skills. Now, I dare say that this disconnect existed, even in the past, but it's kind of accentuated at this time. And there are huge challenges and disenchantment on both sides, really. So in an environment, and I think that in the current environment, the ask is really to be able to perhaps not ask the same questions and look for the same answers, but to kind of change what we're looking for in the context is perhaps explore learning agility, maturity, resilience, other aspects of the human personas as compared to what we've been looking for traditionally. So I'm going to invite you into the conversation. What is your view on this? Yeah, what is the how are you seeing how the entry level space has gotten sort of disrupted, and what should organizations be looking for at this time?
Okay, thank you for having me, Soja. Thank you for this fantastic year-end chat. It's things we talk about all the time. It's things that we obsess about all the time as capability professionals. And I'm taking the widest definition of capability here. How is human capability um, going to differentiate itself in the future, and how is it different from the way we did it for perhaps the last 200 years and the last 40 years, the industrial era and then the knowledge. Uh, and as we enter this semi-autonomous era that we're going into, it's quite radical. It's just lots of assumptions that we take for granted, that are taught in schools and colleges, that are spoken about on dinner tables, will need to be examined. Uh, so just go back to your original question. I think the data is irrefutable that you look at hiring in Google, Meta, and Microsoft, Amazon as a case in point. Just these four companies, new grad hires pre-pandemic, post-pandemic were down 25%. They're down 50% on a decade, old per capita number. So if you look at the total employee base and the percentage of that employee base that were typically new graduates, of course the employee bases have increased as the business footprint has increased. But if you look at it on a relative basis, it's 50% down from where it was. Now, this is because of two factors. Number one is there's been mass automation of very junior roles, and this is even before AI came in, right? So simple machine learning, simple algorithmic intelligence, simple repetitive decision making started going away. Labor, with, even if it was dumb machines and then smart machines, a lot of manual jobs are going away. You look at the mobility, transport as a case in point. What's coming with autonomous driving and self-driving trucks? We have an experiment of self-driving trucks from port to port in Singapore already. At night, you can see them, huge, trains of containers being driven by self-autonomous vehicles from the central port to the one on the edge of the west coast. So it's already there in the commercial space. It's going to hit the sort of retail space in a bit, and then eventually the question is, do we need to spend X billion hours behind the wheel, or can we use that time more productively as we commute, or we sit in a vehicle? So that's the evidence, right? It's not coming back. Junior roles, repetitive algorithmic roles are increasingly getting automated. Now, there's a positive and a negative lens to this. The positive lens is that the way jobs worked in the industrial economy is that these were transitory positions, because there was almost the promise of progression. If you were good at what you did, you rose. And there was, in a growing global economy, growing global labor force, increasingly more opportunities for labor to create value. I think that's where the future is going. And I say this is a positive shift, because this kind of work was never meant for humans to do. We are, if you just look at what we bring to the table, we're these incredibly talented, incredibly perceptive.
Ingenious, yeah.
But we're being forced to do rather dumb jobs for the first 10 most creative years of our life, before we can rise into positions where we're managers, pretty much executing what someone else wants us to do. And then we get to a position maybe 20, 30 years later where we can truly drive innovation. By then, the world has shifted. Most leaders in the old world lived in ivory towers, 11, 12 positions up from the new joiners.
Mm.
never met a customer, never really, understood the realities on the ground. And they were the ones, funding innovation and funding product decisions and so on and so forth. So
Mm.
I don't think it's the most functional capability model for
Mm.
talent,
Mm.
right? When I say talent,
Mm.
I don't mean high potentials. I just mean
Yeah.
human capability and human
Yeah.
ingenuity and creativity and so on.
Mm.
So while it's ambiguous, while it's unsettling, uh, people need to sort of wake up to the fact that in this new economy that we enter, it's pretty much about two things. It's about skills
Mm.
and it's about mindset. They're
Mm.
very boring words. We hear it a lot, but I don't think
Yeah.
people understand what the essence
Yeah.
of these words going forward is all about. It's not about static skills. It's
Mm.
about dynamic skills. It's
Mm.
about depth and
Yeah.
expertise and a passion for expertise.
Yeah.
Uh, because if we build the right expertise in the right areas at the right time, there will
Mm.
always be work. I
Mm.
don't say jobs, but there will always be work
Yeah. Yeah.
for high quality talent.
Yeah. So I'm just going to take you back a bit, right? So to begin with, I think while I couldn't agree more with a lot of what you're saying here, I'm just wondering, not all organizations are at that level of automation where they've really automated all their entry level jobs, really. If you just take a step back to be able to say that, you just said talent should be looked at in the context of mindset and skills. And if we focus a bit on that to say, what should that entry level talent mindset and skills really be like, what would be your recommendation to organizations that are still hiring these people at entry level, and there is some time to go before they can build expertise and the rest of that? Yeah, what should be these personas? We're talking about learning agility, we're talking about having the sort of mindset, to be able to manage, solve problems, to be able to look at things with a different perspective. To begin with, I'm not sure we have in India an education system that actually supports this kind of exploratory experimentation kind of mindsets. We still oriented towards the right answer. And so you bring in these people and you want to be able to open them up, to be able to prepare themselves to be able to perform in the context of the new economy. And I'm just wondering, in that context, what should we be looking for when we're looking to be able to hire this talent that has high learning agility, which has the ability to be able to think solutions, which is demonstrating maturity beyond their years? How do we kind of get people? What should we be looking at? What should we be doing? Because this space is highly uncreatively handled in many parts, in many organizations. What I mean by that is it's still the same old ecosystem. I'm not sure it has disrupted to keep pace with the environment. So I'm just wondering, what can someone who's listening in on this podcast do differently in terms of being able to hire the right kind of talent at entry levels?
Yeah, no, I think it's really it's a great question. So look, I'm a very positive guy, so I'm always seduced by the opportunities in these situations rather than everything that's negative. And of course, there's a lot negative. I'm not
Mm,
being rose tinted here, but the reality is it's best to start with the
mm,
possibilities and then work your way into the problems and try and solve them.
yeah.
Uh, that's the strengths based approach or whatever also. So I think India is very lucky to be in two very fortuitous situations. The first is when a lot of the world is really struggling with demography, there is a demographic dividend in India,
Mm,
right? And I know that if not managed well, that's a problem. But the
yeah.
reality is it's there, right? That's
Oh,
a starting point.
oh
The
yeah,
second,
it's 75% of the workforce. You're not escaping this. I mean, if
yeah,
you, unless you have robots to replace them, this you engaging with millennials and Gen Z and soon with Gen Alpha,
yeah.
if you really want talent.
But the fight is not with robots. I think robots are good at doing certain things which humans are not good at doing. Um, and let the robots do what they have to do. If we're chasing that job,
Mm,
or we're focused entirely on fighting automation, I think we're going to lose, and
yeah,
we're going to get very depressed because I think we miss out on what the
yeah,
possibilities are. So
yeah.
the first answer is demography is an asset. The second answer is that India, unlike China or the US,
Mm.
It's not an innovation engine. It never has been. I think the fantasy that we want to become a US, or you're
Mm.
right, the ecosystem is in there.
Yeah.
Uh, the maturity of the financial markets, the maturity of um, the consumer markets, the maturity of the pricing models just isn't there.
Mm.
In China, they've built it. They've thrown a lot of money, trillions and trillions of dollars behind building
Mm.
this ecosystem, which provides a platform to entrepreneurship and on platform to innovation. And they have an academic system where today China files the highest number of patents, almost twice what the
Mm.
US files. And the
Mm.
US has been the traditional leader. Now, other markets which have strong education systems, Europe as a case in point, are also failing. They're
Mm.
falling behind hugely, but they're falling behind for other reasons. I think India has always been behind. But what is a huge asset, and I think in some ways a benefit, is that India is a very good fast follower.
Mm.
It's very, very good at learning, in essence, what the business model is, and then homo, gloating it or whatever to the local environment, adapting it to the needs of Indian consumers, finding a price point, and then getting it out. And yes, there will be mistakes, there will be failures, there will be bad products in this journey. So they're great at learning quickly and
Mm.
adapting and being agile enough to bring in ideas, as long as someone else has shown them the
Mm.
path. uh, and it's very expensive and very time and money consuming to be at the cutting edge of innovation. So
Mm.
it's probably not the best use of our very limited resources as a developing nation to be at that level in all industries. Some industries for sure, but not all. That's the India story. Now, the other side is the mindset.
Mm.
Uh, I want a government job.
Yeah.
I want to be an engineer. I want to be a doctor. I want these very, very clean professional pathways to success. If you're talented, that's what most parents, sort of are instilling in intelligent children at the early age. Now that
Yeah.
has to change. That has to change. Now, the
Yeah.
moment that changes, then the obsession with the marks change. And the
Mm.
fact that, look, education is foundational currency. It's
Mm.
foundational competence. You need it.
Mm.
I don't think. I mean, it's you got to be very talented to drop out of school in the eighth grade and still, become a world class entrepreneur. People have done it and they've done it really well. But somewhere in college where you find your calling is a safer spot because the foundations are in place.
Yeah.
Uh, but education can't be everything. It
Mm.
can't be. So today, information is free.
Mm.
Information as is accessible, and increasingly with democratization of basic AI, access
Mm.
to information, and being
Mm.
smart about information uh, is a superpower that I think
Mm.
everyone has. Number one is how sharp is the superpower. Number two
Mm.
is what are we doing alongside education to sharpen our business and
Mm.
our value creation acts.
Mm.
That could be having this one passion project, or doing something in the social space, or doing something with an idea for a simple app that you have. Half of
Mm.
these ideas will germinate into something which creates tremendous value.
Right.
Either you learn, uh, and you move on to other things,
Yeah.
or you fail, and failure can be a huge teacher too.
Yeah.
So just creating that energy
Mm.
around the fact that if you spot a problem, how does business model innovation work? You spot a
Mm.
customer,
Mm.
problem, you find a workable solution, and you figure out how to monetize that solution. There's only three steps in this.
Mm.
And if you can tune young talent to say education is important, but it's maybe 60% of your focus at different ages, and
Mm.
40% should be on other things.
Yeah.
Uh, that's, I think, the missing piece right now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. And so,
but
are you suggesting that while we can't wait for the entire education system to revolutionize, are you suggesting that this is what potential employers should ask people or try and probe to be able to understand? For example, you just put out some very good ideas there, which is, have you attempted something which failed? right? Have you basically, worked on a passion project before? What is that passion project? Is there a problem that you're thinking about solving, and what is that problem and how do you want to solve it? I'm just wondering, I'm making this sort of more meaningful for talent managers who've joined in here today to be able to say,
Yep.
what should we be exploring? You're saying 60% around this is around saying that, I'm going to look at your education because it's still giving me a direction north about you, but I still want to explore this other side to you, which is perhaps unexplored, or basically coming in to figure whether you are someone who thinks beyond your syllabus. Are you
Correct.
somebody who's exploratory,
Correct.
and the
Correct.
rest? And I'm just wondering if they want to add to that, which is what I advise my clients, which is, other than the ingenuity that you're talking about, you have evidence of some form of ingenuity, problem solving, passion project, or even in failed entrepreneurial attempt, somewhere, even when you were much younger or a teenager or whatever. Do you, can we evaluate for discipline? And I'm saying that the discipline part, because that seems to be another big bugbear when you actually bring in people on board, which is to get them to perform in the ecosystem of the organization. And I'm saying, you come into a workplace and there is a commitment to be able to deliver. There are timelines. There's some very basics that you're expecting people to be able to sort of work around, and oftentimes this is where the relationship falls apart, because you don't have someone who knows how to work in that ecosystem to deliver what's required when it's required. So what are the ground rules this person has upheld through, their college years, even at home? Do you have the ability to live by ground, for example? So, I see discipline as a very significant element to evaluate, especially when you're bringing in young talent. The other one that I'm constantly asking for is, do you have the resilience for failure?
Yeah.
When you've not made it, not when you've made it, when you didn't make it, you didn't get selected, you didn't get included, how do you handle that? You know what I mean? Do you have the maturity to be able to get your arms around it? Because when you come into a workplace, you're going to be up against a lot of this. You're not going to be on all the teams, you're not going to be on all the projects, you're not going to be on some of the pet projects you would like to be on. How do you deal with when things don't happen the way I want them to happen? You know what I mean? So I think resilience is another very
And social
large element.
skills. And social skills, the ability to work with others, communicate to a customer of some sort, even if it is non-monetary or non-profit or whatever. Just the ability to engage with society at
Yeah.
different levels.
Yeah.
People who are suppliers, and then look after their interests and look after your colleagues' interests.
Yeah.
These are skills which are, I don't think you can learn in a classroom, even if you
Oh yeah.
max every paper you ever got. So this is where I think we're obsessing too much about AI and jobs and automation. This is a
Yeah.
continuous journey.
Oh yeah.
It keeps changing. The label keeps changing. It's
Yeah.
never gone away. I
Yeah.
remember in my book, in Future Ready Organization, I wrote about spreadsheets, and we did
Mhm.
this whole case study on right from VisiCalc in 1979 to Lotus 123 in 1983, and then Excel in 87. How there were doomsday predictions that you would never need an accountant anymore, you'd never need a
Yeah.
bookkeeper anymore, and
Oh
the
yeah.
obsession was with the fact that you can reconcile in seconds. Why would you need someone with a ledger, sitting and spending a week on a bank reconciliation? And in reality, yes, bookkeeper jobs did plateau and then eventually decline a little bit
Hmm.
relatively. Yes, those jobs did get automated,
Hmm.
but the power of spreadsheets led to whole new professions like forensic accounting and management consulting and stock analytics, and suddenly a stockbroker could analyze a million companies on a single spreadsheet, or 1,000 companies on a single spreadsheet. I don't know how much the spreadsheet can handle, but you get the point. Compared to having manual folders with annual reports and stuff.
Hmm.
So it's about embracing these technologies and recognizing that they give you the capability to reinvent how
Yeah.
work is done. And you
Yeah.
go to a smart owner or a smart entrepreneur or a smart manager and you say, hey, listen, I've got ideas on how to do this.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to not take a bet on you if you're a
Yeah.
young talent. But if you say, I'm here for a job and this is my mark sheet, I
Hmm.
don't think that's cutting it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just wondering, what is your view on evaluating for EQ while you're bringing people talent into the workplace? And I'm saying this not only because we do work in the EQ space, but because there's always a question about why is this not, sort of integrated into, your syllabus earlier, like it is in the West, increasingly in schools and the rest of that, which is the opportunity to at least work on emotional awareness and emotional regulation, even for children. And we introduce this very late
Yeah.
in the curriculum, if at all, and it's often the reason why things fall apart, the reason why you don't get the retention you want, you don't get the contribution you want, or you don't get the quality of leadership that you want. And I'm wondering whether this is something else, which is, so one of the dimensions on EQ and interpersonal is an orientation for harmony and relationship building, which is right at the center of working in an organization. Whether you in oriented towards harmony and people, if you really aren't, and there are lots of people who aren't, I'm just wondering about pulling them in, using this residency rule to keep promoting people to leadership positions even when they don't have the fundamental of even being interested in relationship building. Now these could be brilliant people who you could use for other assignments, which are perhaps individual contributor or other kind of assignments that don't require you to be able to deal with the complexities of people. And I'm saying, I'm just still wondering whether we have the wisdom of this at the entry level. And I don't know what your views about this is.
I let me start with the positive. I think today's talent is more socially aware than the
Mm,
previous generations.
mm,
Uh, they're they've got a stronger worldview
mm,
and true citizens of the world than previous generations.
mm,
Two generations back, you could never question your parents. You had to
mm,
blindly follow. Today, there is a much more active dialogue.
mm,
Parents have also changed. Teachers
mm.
have changed too. We got to give a lot of credit to the fact that it isn't about just rapping people on the knuckles and that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
fear,
yeah,
psychosis or whatever in
yeah,
education is fast fading. There's a lot
yeah.
more awareness around mental health and
Mm,
balance.
mm,
There's a lot more appreciation for neurodiversity than there
yeah,
ever was. So there are lots of positives in this. Again,
yeah,
we get seduced by the negative, and there's more noise around the negative.
yeah.
But the reality is that my kids are twice as smart as I was at their age.
Mm,
So you've got to trust the human condition. We haven't come here by accident.
yeah,
We mess up a lot. We're very noisy. We're very sort
yeah,
of unrefined, but we get
yeah,
there because we ask the
yeah,
right questions eventually, and then we
yeah,
look for the
yeah.
right answers.
Yeah, I was
And
actually alluding to the increased complexities in the environment at this time, which
yeah,
really require more emotional agility. I'm not saying that emotional agility wasn't required in the past, but I'm saying it's inevitably important in the current environment that you actually have the sense of being able to
you won't
demonstrate,
survive. You won't survive
EQ early
today.
positions,
Yeah,
you know, yeah.
yeah. Maybe not everyone's going to be an expert at it. No, not
Oh yeah,
everyone's going to be as refined and as polished as James Bond in putting their sort of persona in front of
yeah,
everyone. But
yeah,
um, I think they're incredibly smart
yeah,
and aware and
yeah,
assertive. And even
yeah,
with management structures breaking down, with now more servant leadership and agile management and
yeah,
Scrum and all of these ideas coming in,
yeah,
uh, it's more about the team. It's more about the individual and their voice, no
yeah,
matter the. And I love what the pandemic did. One of the greatest contributions in a very perverse way of COVID-19 was that it forced us all to work off a screen.
mm,
And the screen is the ultimate democracy
mm,
because the CEO has the same real estate on the screen as the intern.
yeah,
It's exactly the same.
yeah,
And they have the same mute button and they have the same voice.
mm,
So it forced people to think outside of the physical construct of the boardroom and the big chair and the small chairs and
yeah,
the fancy
yeah,
suits and Rolex watches and stuff. Those things didn't matter at all, and
yeah.
everyone knew that the CEO wasn't wearing trousers. They were sitting in their pajamas at home. So it was fun, and I think it served us a lot across the world. This would have taken 10 more years in more traditional cultures like India to
Yeah,
to
I
really achieve
don't know
democracy.
whether we went back. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
My whole thing is that I thought the pandemic was such an opportunity, such an opportunity to turn around the command and control styles, and like you're saying, more of an equalizer, bring in more of, the egalitarian cultures that are actually so meaningful for being able to
Very true.
integrate human beings in a venture. I'm afraid, I think, in a lot of places it's just gone bang back to where it was before the pandemic. I dare say that the command and control is not diluted very
it's
significantly. I
it's
think
a
the
generational thing also, Sujay.
yeah,
It's a
yeah,
generational thing. I mean, every generation is very comfortable with a certain way of operating, but trust the human condition.
yeah,
The 30-year-olds, the millennials that are rising into senior leadership will do it very differently. They're not wearing ties anymore. No one's
mm,
wearing formals to the office in that generation.
yeah,
they've become more informal, and
yeah,
it's a very superficial and a very visual way of asserting yourself that, look, formality is useful only in environments where there is life at risk,
mm,
or a safety consideration like the army or a
mm,
construction site or whatever else. That's
mm,
where you have to follow the command and control, otherwise
mm,
people die and stuff. But
mm,
outside of that,
mm.
we've lost. I mean, the army will still wear its uniform, but there was a
Yeah,
banking uniform, there was an IT uniform, and it's all
yeah,
getting diffused
yeah,
to great effect.
yeah.
So I think when the millennials replace the Gen Xers like us,
Mm,
there would be another sort of sea shift
yeah.
in the way organizations work.
Yeah. So now let me bring you to something important because you just mentioned the millennials taking on from the Gen X, and I wanted to try and bring in this whole phenomena of reducing mid levels or wiping them out
Mm.
completely in the
Yep.
interest of building agility within workplaces. We've had lots of those instances currently. What is your feeling? What is your reaction to that? I mean, is it
I think.
paradox to do this, which is just completely wipe out mid managements within organizations? The problem being that they're not being able to translate what they're supposed to do as linchpin between strategy and execution, is that they're actually slowing things down rather than accelerating it. And I'm wondering whether this is combined with the phenomena of residency based promotions, which is you get promoted nevertheless because you've done time, and so ill prepared people taking on mid to senior kind of positions, as a result of which the reaction to that has been that they're not adding value, slowing us down, not agile enough for our environment, and so you just kind of wipe out the entire mid
Right.
management. What's your sort of
Correct.
reaction?
I think go back to Peter's principle, which is that people rise to their level of incompetence, and you have a lot of people who are in the middle who honestly should not be there. Uh,
Mm,
that is where we slow things down.
mm,
Essentially, if we have too many levels, so flattening the organization structure is
mm,
inevitable. Again, it's part of the human condition rewiring for the future. It's very organic, it's very
mm,
natural. It makes a lot of sense.
mm,
Um, because for 40 odd years, managers defined their reason for being as supervisors of performance.
mm,
And that went up against this outcome oriented culture. So there was
mm,
this lot of tension between the fact that we wanted to manage for outcomes, but we were trying to use very industrial frameworks of
mm,
time and number of sort of reports created or number of widgets built or whatever, even in knowledge
mm.
roles, number of lines of code or whatever else,
Yeah.
without quality lens. So if a person who came in on time and acted like they're working or whatever, they always somehow were treated as a valued employee. When in reality, that's not the definition of value, right? It's the
Mm,
real value created for the customer, for the shareholder, and for your colleagues.
mm,
Uh, so now with network analysis and stuff, you're really realizing that there are some people who create exponential value,
mm,
who are connected with they're real social connectors in the organization. The others were just living in their little fishbowl and very happy uh,
mm,
doing what they do.
mm,
And every human being needs to ask themselves, what's the strategic value I created this week?
mm,
And if you ask a lot of middle managers that question and they can't answer it by really being impressed themselves that I've
mm,
done something that really moved the organization forward, helped the customers in a concrete way, then that's the best self appraisal for yourself, right? You don't
mm.
need a manager anymore to tell you that you're not adding much value. So each of us needs to have products that we own, that we can add our personality to.
Yeah.
Each of us needs to have ideas and play, um, that we can, sort of motivate. I mean, we get up in the morning not to get a
Yeah.
pay slip, but to move our idea forward, and take it to the next level. That's the kind of role that will survive. The roles that can't answer that question, I don't think will survive. Now, it could be at any level in the organization, right? So, I
Mm.
mean, of course, the middle managers get a bad rap
Yeah.
because they've been essentially, like you said, postmen or translators, depending on how flattering or
Mm.
real you want to be, uh, through the organization. But the
Mm.
reality is, there's very little space
Mm.
for that anymore. There's another point I'll add. There's another
Yeah.
point I'll add, which is more in the spirit of talent economics, and more about the management equation, or
Mm.
the formula.
Mm.
Uh, Management used to be about the why,
Mm.
and the who, and the where, and the how, and the what.
Mm.
Correct? It was about all these things. If you
Yeah.
really go
Yeah.
back to Frederick Winslow and how they wrote the 12 principles or whatever, it was all of these things in different shapes or form.
Mm.
Management now is definitely about the what. The what is the fulcrum. It doesn't go away. What are we trying to do here? But
Mm.
it's becoming much more about the why and the how, which are
Mm.
more creative than the
Mm.
where and sorry, the why and the who, rather
Mm.
than the where and the how,
Mm.
which are very boring and algorithmic. So
Mm.
work can be done from anywhere. Work can be done by a number of different capability, sort of sources,
Mm.
internal, external, sort of whatever,
Mm.
outsourced, so on and so forth. So it, it is the creative side of management that adds
Mm.
value.
Mm.
Why are we doing this? And who's going to do it? And who's the right person to do it? So management is much more creative in the future than it was, sort of scientific in the past.
Mm.
Scientific management has lived. I mean, that era is fading. It's
Mm.
now about creative value addition, coaching, really helping others, really investing in, finding creative solutions to the same old
Yeah.
problems that we face.
Yeah.
And those kinds of
I'm
managers seem
so
to do
glad
well.
you're saying that. I'm sorry I'm interrupting. I'm just so glad you're saying that because every time I've had someone tell me, oh, we're all got good people now on board and we've got people who we're bringing in on board as well who are great. But, our mid management, I mean, they're just like entirely, they're very weak. They're not as good as they should be. And this
I
is a
wouldn't
group
call them weak.
we
They need to
need
be
to work
inspired.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
I'm
need to be
saying that.
inspired.
No,
Yeah.
I'm saying it's not uncommon to get this. Yeah, the mid management is, so it's really my Achilles heel is the mid management. And here's my point. I always ask, are these people that are homegrown? Are these people you've laterally hired and you've kind of got this team
Yeah.
together? And they say, no, no,
Yeah.
no, these are homegrown. And I'm saying if this has happened under your watch, which is you're the leadership, and these are the people who you've grown inside the organization, how did we arrive at a point where we have people who we're saying are not up to the mark, not being able to do what's required to get done, are basically slowing the organization down and the rest of that? This requires an intervention called coaching, which is, if we've not done it in the past, then we start doing it prospectively. I mean, I'm just wondering about the morality of having the entire group removed because you want to become more agile.
No, I mean, in some cases, yes, you've got too many. Okay, fine, it's surgical and stuff. In other
Mm.
places, you've got a very tall organization need to flatten it. Those are no brainers, right? Those situations are surgical and need to be done. But in reality, whatever is left, wherever it's left, needs to also be very excited and inspired and creative and be creating things, which are adding value. Must see themselves as part of strategy, part of execution, part of
Yeah,
the organization's product. Yeah.
couldn't agree more. I wanted to move this into another sort of phenomena that we're seeing unfold in many organizations, which is having two in the box, which is having the top leadership position shared by two people. And I'm wondering what are your, because you wrote so many books on talent, what's your take on this? I'm just wondering about the downside of this, but we'll start with the upside. On
Yeah.
it appears it's done strategically to get two kinds of skill sets which are important
No, it,
strategically,
it,
which
it,
don't
it,
reside in the same person, to be combined and used together. And now
some
this
of
is
this
this
is causal. Yeah.
sorry.
Some of this is causal. Some of it is consequential. So if you just strip out,
Mm,
you know, the how or whatever, I
mm,
think my hypothesis, and just reflecting on stuff I've read, right? Phenomenal masters who are a million times better than I am.
mm,
Manfred Ket de Vries at INSEAD wrote this incredible book called Reflections on Character and Leadership. Very academic book, but in there is hidden, I think one of the core nuggets of wisdom that we need in order to look at any construct or any sort of demand
mm.
from the human mind in very, very complex organizations and complex roles, right? So this is a response to complexity. That's the simple answer.
Of
The response
course.
to complexity. Now, what he said was that he is a coach of CEOs. He spends a lot of time with CEOs, and he says a lot of CEOs I coach, actually demonstrate or have symptoms of the imposter syndrome, which used to be
Mm,
with PhDs, or it was a
yeah,
very academic idea. Uh, because you're supposed to be an expert, you're supposed to be the master of everything, but in reality, you've just you've gone 10,000 miles deep on one topic, and you've really done great on it, but outside of that,
yeah.
you're not the master of all domains in that field. But that's how the world looks at you. So he says the
Mm,
modern CEO jumps on a plane, lands up in an office somewhere in the world. His team presents 40 pages of PowerPoint and then asks questions, or asks for a decision. And a lot of CEOs, they look at the all the perks of the job and the fancy money they get in the corner office and stuff, and they say, my job is to make decisions, high quality decisions. That's the calling of the role. But they're making it increasingly on more superficial context. They're not able
mm,
to dive deep because
mm,
an organization is 200 countries or whatever else. So after a point, they realize some of their decisions they don't believe in anymore, or they're not
mm.
working as well. But it's very public. It's been
Yeah,
announced. And stood on a stage and spoken to the
yeah.
press. So that's the paradox of leadership today. You
Mm,
don't have the capacity. The human brain, 24 hours in a day, you just don't have the building blocks for deep,
mm,
high quality decision making in
mm.
many, many complex organizations and
Yeah,
complex. So there
yeah,
are two ways we can solve for this. Number one is you hire incredibly smart people and you empower them.
yeah,
You decentralize.
yeah.
And in talent economics, one of the most famous quotes was that the only way to manage
Mm,
complexity
mm,
and control is to give up that control.
mm,
You know, the only
mm,
way you can manage complexity with greater control is to give up that control. Very
mm,
paradoxical, but
mm,
you have to decentralize. Now, who you
mm.
decentralize to, so therefore being really
Yeah.
smart at hiring the right, people under
Oh, yeah.
you and so on. But the other area is that sometimes just the decision making complexity
Mm,
requires two or three heads rather than one. And
mm.
the org structure sort of comes in the way. So
Yeah,
these are natural symptomatic responses to
yeah,
rising complexity. And
yeah,
I have seen, I have also done many roles where I'm a close collaborator with someone. We sort of share a common
yeah,
outcome. And as long as you're aligned, you have, you're doing it with all the right intentions. You're driven by a common purpose. You're driven by a set of common values. It can be liberating as a
yeah,
as a working model, because you have
yeah,
an ally. You
yeah.
have someone you can talk to. You have someone you can process what didn't work with,
Mm,
and because they're sharing,
yeah,
the same context, they don't judge you.
yeah,
They recognize that this is, something
yeah,
they could have done equally.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I think the model presumes wisdom in very
yeah,
significant, to your
yeah.
point on aligning and almost working in unison, right? And I think that requires work, and it also requires maturity. And in the event that that doesn't come together, the wisdom and maturity don't come together to get this unison that you're looking for. This can be a political nightmare, within organizations. This can just collapse into something terrible.
I totally agree, and I've always felt, you know, that it's quality of CEO, but quality of the executive team as a whole. That's the first line of defense in organizations against, rising complexity, and then the
Mm,
quality of, future talent and the managers and the attraction
yeah,
and retention of critical talent. I know that there's something very close to your heart too.
yeah.
We lose a lot of very, very smart people because we trap them in very dumb jobs.
Hmm.
So retaining, you know, real intelligence in an organization is critical in managing this complexity.
Absolutely. We've got in a world where economy, finance doesn't meet innovation and creative ideas. How do we fix the gap? We have a question here. Do you want to try and answer it? In a world where economy, I think it means where economy and finance doesn't meet innovation and creative ideas. How do we fix the gap?
We're going to have to be better because the data shows, and this is US data, right? I don't know what it, but you can hypothesize it's the same in many mature industries. But data shows that if you compare labor's contribution to economic output in 1980 and today, we're down to just 40%. So we've lost 60% of influence on total aggregate economic output. And that's just because of the rise of IP, the rise of mechanization, the rise of international business. Innovation is everywhere, and a lot of our CFOs, I would give them a lot of credit. They're managing incredibly complex outcomes. They need to be inspired too. They need to
Yeah.
see economic value in the experiments we're putting out there, and we have to package them better so that uh, you know. I mean, I work with some incredibly talented CFOs, to be honest, and I
I
think
could.
they've changed also. They're not bookkeepers anymore.
Mm,
They're
mm,
great evaluators of what is true balance sheet potential and what is the P&L about. And if you inspire them on the balance sheet side, you know, in future economic value and embedded value of the organization going up in the long term, they'd be your greatest allies.
mm, Couldn't agree more on this one. Want to move this conversation over, and I can see, we have barely 10 minutes to go. So, want to take this to your area of interest, which is, what do you see as the inevitable AI and human dance? Yeah, mindset over mastery in the context of that. This is going to be inevitable for everyone. What do we see for talent in the next 5 years in the context of this? And how do we go beyond the upskilling and the mindsets needed to be able to actually enable this dance? I mean, we defining the fifth industrial revolution by this dance. And so I wanted to get your inputs on this, which is how do you see this dance evolve? Some of it is seeming like hype because there are plenty of organizations that are not yet very significantly impacted with this, but it is an inevitable. So what should talent managers, what should leaders be looking out for in the context of enabling this dance in a meaningful way?
Look, this is nothing but computing by another name, right? When computers turned up, the typewriters went out, filing cabinets went out. There was a lot of very superficial change for those
Mm,
people who were very attached to their computers and to their typewriters and their cabinets. But
mm,
it was a breakthrough for people who weren't.
mm,
Uh, I'm not. I don't think AI is going to be that disruptive. To be honest,
mm,
I think you cut straight through the hype for three reasons. There are three very clear reasons. Number one, the monetization model hasn't emerged yet,
mm,
so you
mm,
can't pay for all this compute. Number two, the energy economics don't work yet, so we're like a factor of 100 times away from artificial general intelligence. What
mm,
we have is very baby AI,
mm,
and we stuck at that level unless we somehow figure how to double the total aggregate gigawatt production on planet Earth,
mm,
uh, power the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that. So it may come from quantum or whatever, but these are experimental. Technology just isn't there. NVIDIA chips are not going to be able to do it.
mm,
That's the second bit. The third is that the way the global financial markets are treating this, there's going to be one very, very painful correction,
mm. Okay.
which will reset a lot of things, which will
Okay.
really reset. I think 90% of these AI models will disappear. The 10% that survive will scale, and better economics. Has happened with the internet revolution. It happened with everything that we've seen, at every stage of technological evolution. It's in some ways you could hypothesize this is part of the process. If you don't
Yeah.
have this, it's not robust enough, correct?
Mm,
So it happened with electricity. It happened with automation, automated factory floors. It happened with mobility, with the steam engine, and so on. It happened with computers. It's happening with AI. Now, for talent,
Mm.
20 or 25% of the jobs that we did in the last generation, the worst jobs, the most boring jobs that you could, I mean, you've wasted so much human potential stuck in dead end, rhythmic, algorithmic jobs for 30 years, 40 years, just for a retirement paycheck and a couple of rooms in real estate. That's been the equation. You tell my kids that you're going to give 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day for the next 35 years, just so that you can own a house one day and pay a mortgage or whatever. You think that's their purpose in life, or they got to sign up to this? No way. And I would hate for that to be their outcome. We were
Mm.
delusional enough because of the echo
Condition.
chamber we were in to buy
Yeah.
into that. That we're creating systemic wealth, and we're building financial security, and all of those things are not what inspires young talent today.
Yeah.
So 25% of jobs that are gone forever are the good jobs that should go, or the bad jobs. Sorry, it's a good
Mm.
riddance. Sorry, I meant good riddance.
Mm.
But everyone has 50% more potential with this new technology. So you have
Mm.
superpowers. You have the ability to accelerate. You have the ability to access information.
Mm.
The way your mobile phone works is the worst way to organize information. It's like every
Mm.
app is like a book. It resembles a library rather than the internet. One app
Mm.
doesn't talk to the other app. All your information is trapped within applications.
Yeah.
You can't access it. You need to be a librarian. That's an incredibly inefficient way
Yeah.
to operate.
Yeah.
So AI gives us the ability to access this it's an
Mm.
internet layer over this library that gives you, you know, be it over your computer or your phone, access to superpowers that we've never
Mm.
had,
Mm.
right? Just the ability to manage, optimize, maximize value of time, really focus on finding the right information without wasting energy. All of that is new human superpowers given to us by even this dumb AI, with
Mm.
whatever 10 million synapses, or the brain
Yeah.
compute power, the zebrafish, right? That's where it is today. That's where Chat GPT 5 is. But it may go to 6, 7, 8, 9, and then blow up, or we
Mm.
may find better processors and new energy economics that take it to 10, 11, 12, 14. But I suspect it's not going to be as clean or
Yeah.
inevitable. And artificial general intelligence is a pipe dream today.
Yeah.
It's
Mm.
like humans living on Mars or
Mm.
colonizing Mars. It's
Mm.
as much of a pipe dream today.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. I mean, would you expect the audience to feel relieved by hearing this?
I think it's not about being relieved. It's about being excited
Hmm.
and curious.
Hmm.
Because just being relieved takes us back into our comfort zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas we've been wasting, I mean, just look at how news is consumed today.
Hmm.
Five biased people can literally shift the
Oh, yeah.
mindset of a country and take it into a very dark place. Five biased people is all you need.
Hmm.
It, you've got to get out of that trap.
Yeah.
So how you curate information, how you access information,
Yeah.
what you put in your brain is
Yeah.
the first superpower you need. And then
Yeah.
how you sharpen your brain and sharpen your time and your productivity and your output is the second superpower you need. So
Hmm.
it's a learning process, it's a learning curve, it's an
Yeah.
openness and acceptance curve.
Yeah.
And it's not looking for those dumb repetitive algorithmic routine jobs anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's about just letting them go and let
Yeah.
let them get automated.
Yeah, and like you're saying, I think the we said with the optimistic lens, is that with all these jobs going out, they just all for the better because you actually upgrade the quality of jobs that you actually have on offer for people, and that when you're talking about jobs being displaced, you're talking about new ones replacing them. So they basically the idea being that you create a cycle of thrive in the environment for everyone. I want to not miss the opportunity to link this back to talent, particularly for talent managers who are on the call here today, which is what do you see as emerging EVPs in the what should organizations be focusing on in terms of meaningful employer value propositions to be able to actually attract and retain talent in the context of this constant churn, changing flux that we're seeing here, and all the flux has huge opportunities. So, do you want to just look at this in the context of careers and tell me what you think can be, sort of the evolving new EVPs for talent that you're attracting to the organization? What can talent managers try and build within organizations as meaningful EVPs in the context of talent?
So the data shows that the average job, sort of lifespan of Gen Z today is 2 years, and a millennial is 3 years. And 70% are leaving because of a lack of growth, or what they call growth, which is intellectual growth. And we know it's intellectual growth, not positional growth, because flatter organization are not going to get that as much as previous generations. But the reason we know it's about intellectual growth is because 50% are less likely to leave in a strong learning culture or in an organization that invests in them and gives them opportunities for continuous learning. So the EVP for that level is to really give them the time, the resources, and the recognition to learn. And not treat it like a distraction from work, which is the old supervisory mindset, supervising performance. Why are you sitting and doing this e-learning, or why are you sitting on a YouTube video? But just give them that space to say, look, here's your outcomes. These are 3 outcomes you're driving. And if you have spare time beyond these 3, if you can do it in 2 hours, fantastic. You don't need to spend 8 hours doing it. But what are you doing with your other time? And then excite them and enable them to learn. So 70% say they will stay longer if offered, platforms for continuous learning. This is, of course, Forbes data, sponsored by Udemy or whatever. So take it with a pinch of salt. But the reality is that it's not very far from the truth.
Of course.
People really enjoy cultures which invest in them or trust them to invest in themselves. That's number one. The second is that 80% of people who leave in the US say they leave because there's no alignment of purpose and values. So either you're hiring the wrong person, they should thrive in some other culture, they're not fit for you. Your selection levers are wrong. Your radar is weak. Or you're promising something that is a fantasy, not reality. So radical honesty in hiring to say, this is who we are, this is what we do. What's and all, come in, help yourself, hang around for 2-3 weeks. If you like it, let's regularize this.
And I turn that around even to the people who are applying for these jobs, to have more sort of honesty, perhaps more clarity, more integrity around why you're making the choices that you're making when you choose a job. And I think that also is kind of, basically sense of scarcity orientation to say, may not get the next one, so you just take what you want to. And I'm just wondering about asking the purpose question much later, which is kind of mutually not meaningful.
So Tony Sia, the maverick, he's passed on now. What a great guy, founder of Zappos. He 30 years ago started something very, very, I think, experimentally maverick in his age, where after 8 weeks on the job, he would offer his call center and his warehouse team $1,000 to quit. He'd say, $1,000 is going to help you find your next job. If this is not exciting, you get out now. Don't plateau and don't mentally quit and stay. Right? And that's quite seductive. Yeah, that's quite seductive. He did it 30 years ago. But in essence, that's the principle. You want people who really enjoy what they do, and they're doing it for all the right reasons.
Right. So let's turn the camera on the leaders now, the talent managers, the entrepreneurs, the leaders. What one shift in mindset is going to help them manage talent better in the new economy?
Okay, fantastic question. So Sujaya, position doesn't give you power anymore. Control doesn't give you power anymore. How much you care, how much you invest, how much you champion the right values, how much you champion innovation and trust gives you a lot of power in this new world we're getting into. Data gives you power. Being inquisitive gives you power. And I think we need very data savvy leaders who are not all about their own intuition,
Hmm.
but about really understanding what's happening in these organizations, very complex organizations they lead.
Hmm.
Have the humility to hire strong people under them because they can't manage the complexity
Yeah.
otherwise. They're playing Russian roulette with the institution and the legacy that they leave. And you need, I think, just leaders who are very curious to learn
Hmm.
and champion this mindset we keep talking about.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Couldn't agree more. I think that was like a very sort of comprehensive sort of conclusion to our conversation here today. So, Gyan, we actually traveled, hiring in the new economy, retention. We talked a bit about careers and structure, and of course, the inevitable AI partnership. I think this has been such a delight to talk to you. I'm hoping that the people who have joined in here today with us also found this meaningful and useful. I'm looking forward to another conversation with you in the near future. But meanwhile, I want to wrap this up by saying we tried unbundling the talent puzzle, and thank you, Gyan, with your absolutely amazing insights. It's such an amazing thing to have a name like Gyan. You kind of personify your name in so many ways. There is a LinkedIn user saying, thanks for the insights, Gyan. Dr. Sujaya Banerjee very well articulated how the dynamics are rapidly evolving in the Gen AI and AI era. So that kind of also sort of summarizes everything here today. There's Tiffany saying, thank you for these great insights on how to show up as a better strategic partner and key insights of how to collaborate with future foundations. Thank you, Tiffany. I'm sure there are loads of other, someone just saying awesome. So thank you, Emmanuel, for the encouragement. Congratulations, Jaya. Like old times, incredibly rich insights. Thank you, Sthiti Pragna, for attending here today. And so,
You're a,
everyone, thank you
you're
for
a
your time.
queen bee, Sojaya. If I may take 1 minute to just congratulate, I love your energy. I love the way you build your hive and your tribe. You're very special and you're very spectacular as a thinker and as a connector. So
Thank you, Jan. That
kind of
is that.
phenomenal.
I mean,
Always
this
a
is a
pleasure
glorious
talking to you.
note.
Yeah,
Same here. Same here. What a glorious note to end on, everyone. Merry Christmas to all of you and to you,
thank you.
Gyan, and a fabulous 2026, everyone, and a great
Likewise.
talent here for everyone. Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us in here today. Look forward to more on Duologues. And until then, take care, everyone, and have a great season and a great holiday season, basically, and a restful time, as you wake into the new year. Take care, everyone. Thank you,
Well,
Gyan. Thank you,
thank you.
everybody.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.